Hi everybody. There's a couple of you that I promised I would do a video for just to talk about some tomatoes and how to plant them. And I think I've had several that have purchased plants from me that have never planted tomatoes before. So instead of trying to get on there and find a bunch of other videos where they're talking about it, I thought I would just get on here and just give a quick little summary about planting tomatoes and a little bit about them. And let me just throw a clause in there. I'm not an expert gardener by any means. So the stuff that I'm going to go over with you is stuff that has worked for me in the past, and you will develop your own style once you start gardening. And growing tomatoes is one of the most fun things there is to grow because they are so prolific. So I have a little example here. This is a Jerusalem tomato. This is a paste tomato. It is a real beefy tomato, and you can use it for slicing or you can use it for salsas or anything like that. But the kinds is not what I'm going to talk about today anyway. Today I'm going to talk about how to plant them. And so they're basically, almost all of them are the same. There's two different kinds. There is indeterminate tomatoes, and then there are determinate tomatoes. And I think now they even have some that they call semi-determinate tomatoes. But for the most part, most of the tomatoes that I grow are indeterminate, and the difference is that indeterminate tomatoes, their growth is not determined. They will keep growing and growing and growing until the end of the season, until a frost comes, and so you get tomatoes throughout the season. The determinate kind of tomatoes, their growth and the number of tomatoes that they are going to produce is already predetermined by the type of plant that it is. So the determinate tomatoes tend to produce kind of all at once, and so they're good for salsas if you want to do that, because you get so many all at once. And then the indeterminates, like I said, they produce throughout the season. The determinates you do not want to prune. You just let them grow, because whatever you prune off, you're ruining your chance of having tomatoes on whatever it is that you prune off. Indeterminates are a little different. They are the ones that grow big. They grow kind of wild if you just let them go. They get leaves all over them, and they also get what people call suckers, and it's where they get growth in the little Y area is what I call it. Some people call it an armpit. And so there's one right there. I don't know if you can see that, this little growth right here that is growing between this leaf and the main stalk. Those are called suckers. If you will keep those trimmed off, and if you catch them small enough, you can just pull it off with your finger. If you will keep those trimmed off, you'll have a healthier plant. You will be sacrificing some blooms and therefore sacrificing some of your tomatoes, but in the long run, the tomatoes that you do have are going to be bigger tomatoes, and they're going to be better tasting tomatoes, because all of the energy in the plant is going to focus on whatever is in the plant. Whatever you have, that's where the energy is going to go. So if you trim some of it off, that's not going to be useful. It's going to help what you do have, which is also why you're going to keep the bottom of it trimmed. So like this one right here, this one is going to start to get shaded anyway as the plant grows. It's really not going to do any good to keep this. So you can snip those off. Again, if you catch them while they're small, you can just do it with your finger. Otherwise, you'll want to take some little snips and snip them off, because you don't want to do a lot of damage by pulling before it's clipped all the way through. If you strip the outer part off of your tomato, it's going to make it susceptible to disease. So you can I try to keep the bottom 12 inches or so trimmed off of mine, and as it grows, you can go up. So when you plant it, tomatoes like to be planted deep, and so what I do is I would trim off this, and this. I would trim every one of those off, and I would plant that thing probably to right there. That's kind of deep. I usually just leave the very top portion of the plant. And the reason people do that is because all of these little tiny hairs that's on the main stalk of the tomato, anytime that comes in contact with dirt, it's going to turn into roots. And so that really strengthens the plant and gives you a real good root system. And the better your root system is, the better your plant is. Another thing that I do is, if you get plants that are fairly big, like this one, they may already have some little buds or some little flowers that are starting to grow. And this one does. I don't know if you can see that or not. So when you plant the tomato plant out of the cup into the ground or into a pot, wherever you're planting it at, you really should snip that off. And I know it's tempting to keep that because that's fruit. And so you think, well, I don't want to kill the fruit that I'm getting ready to have. But if you will just sacrifice that very first bloom, it will make your plant better and stronger, because instead of all of the energy going into this set of flowers, and which eventually will be fruit, instead of all of your energy going to that to make fruit, it'll be going down into the roots to really strengthen that plant whenever you first plant it. And it's going to need that. That's its foundation. So that's how I start mine. And another thing that I do is whenever I dig the holes to put mine in, now again, this is nothing that is professionally done. It's just the way that I do it. I have purchased compost. I have magnesium, which is Epsom salts. I have 10-10-10 fertilizer granules. And I also have some lime pellets. So I use every one of those whenever I plant my tomato. I dig the hole, and of course I dig it bigger than I'm going to need. I put just a handful of magnesium, I put a handful of the lime, I put a handful of the 10-10-10, and then I put a big scoop, 2 handsful of the compost, and I mix it all together. You don't want those things that I just named off. You don't want those touching the bare roots without being mixed with some dirt, because it can be really hard on your plant. So mix all of those together, and then put your plant in, and then cover it with dirt, and always water your plant in. And I think that's about it. I hope that nobody has planted tomatoes yet, because we're having a cold snap, and I think tonight is the first night of it. I don't know how long it's going to last. But anyway, that's all I can think of. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to just message me or just make a post. Thank you. Happy gardening. Good luck with your tomatoes.